So the topic I got to argue is that the government should not be allowed to collect metadata. Um, so kind of to get started, I think the idea, or at least to go over what metadata is, basically it's everything you do on your phone and kind of like anything you can do digitally, it can track. And so I think we shouldn't be allowing the government to track it because I think it's invasive. They get into stuff that they maybe don't need to hear. And I think it just kind of infringes on our rights to privacy. So the first kind of point I want to argue and just bring up is that there's no real transparency or accountability with it. So the government can look in and do whatever it wants. And if we don't know what they're tracking, it can be really difficult for us to feel like we know what's being shared, right? What if you have something personal on your phone and you don't know that's being shared, and then if you find out later they leak it and like someone finds it on the internet and spills it everywhere, it's really hard to keep them accountable for that, just because we don't know what they're doing, right? So we don't know why it got out or whatever it is. I think the next point, I have some quotes actually I wanted to pull up. So I think my favorite quote is, it says, "Even worse, the line between government and private companies is increasingly blurred." So I think what that's trying to say, at least how I interpret, is that who is in charge of what, the government and private companies, kind of can be a little bit confusing, as we don't have a distinction of what the government is allowed to get into. So I think we need to have a more clear set boundary for what the government can and can't do. So yeah, I think we need to make sure that's more clearly defined. My second point is that metadata collection is ineffective and invasive. So some people will argue that it's good for like national security, right? You can maybe prevent like a terrorist attack. You could, I don't know, maybe there's threats towards someone's life. And so that's kind of the argument for that. That's why people may feel that we need to keep track of that, to keep track of your citizens' like actions and data and what they're doing, where they are, what they're saying. But kind of the evidence doesn't support that it's very effective, especially when you're just trying to track everyone. So I guess what I'm saying is not that we shouldn't be able to allow the government to dig in to stuff if they have to, but allowing them to broadly just sweep into everyone's data and see what everyone's doing is very ineffective, because unless there's probable cause of some sort, right, we have some sort of tip on it, right, there's a very obvious reason to search into them, then you're just kind of scanning, and you're kind of just wasting your time, because a lot of people aren't going to have anything on their phone or what they're doing that you're looking for. And so I think it's just ineffective, and it doesn't really do what it says it's supposed to do of keeping us safe. I think another reason that we shouldn't let the government collect our data is because it kind of violates our rights. So I think we have the right to privacy, and allowing the government to kind of look at whatever they want to kind of violates that. So you don't really have true privacy, and that to me is kind of scary. So I think people don't realize just how much they would have access to that, have access to everything you do. And if you don't want people to know it, they're going to know it anyway. Another point I want to make is just, I think allowing the government broadly to just track and pay attention to our personal life is just an overreach. And I think my biggest pushback on allowing them to do that is mostly there's not really any accountability and transparency, like I said earlier. Because if we could have some accountability and some transparency and we can kind of know what's going on, that would be okay. But the problem with that, and the reason why I think they shouldn't, is because privacy, that I think is very important, where's that line? And so that's really hard, because now you're like, okay, we want the government to be transparent, but in order to be transparent, the privacy is going to be infringed on. So those are just some of my points. I think in short, if we want to keep our First and Fourth Amendment, I didn't mention them earlier, but basically I think those two amendments are very important to privacy, and not being searched and have your stuff looked through, even if it is digital, are very important. And yeah, that's my points.